Before I touch base on Binary Data Volume 3, I want to touch back on Binary Data Volume 2, which was my first album review. My original rating for that album was a 94%, and thinking back on it now, I do think I was far too generous considering the blaring problems of that album. The secondary problem was the lack of melodic variation. Even though it was present in Volume 2, I do think there was not enough of it for me to warrant that high of a rating. The main issue was the power/reverberation problem, which was very lacking. I do think that was a production issue because there was a lack of it in the album compared to some of the Instagram reels that Alfonso Peduto posted when he was previewing the album. I am going to lower the rating down to an 80%. Binary Data Volume 2 is still a great album to listen to, and I would definitely give it a second listen. However, those blaring problems do not warrant a 94%. I feel like I need to be more critical of the artists that I like. Alfonso Peduto is probably my favorite modern pianist of all time, so I want him to do better in the future. Nitpick everything that you like and even the things that you dislike. Nitpicking is how you get clear, precise, and concise ratings for everything. I feel like if you do not nitpick enough, things will not be as precise, but that is just my way of rating things. Anyway, on to the album review. Album review number 3. This album review is going to be pretty interesting because usually throughout my music reviews, I show previews of the songs that I am reviewing before I give scores. However, for this review, I am not going to do that, and it is for a pretty sad reason. I listened to the entirety of Binary Data Volume 3 twice. Now, on my second listen, I did feel a little bit better about it, but on my first listen, I felt disappointed. I liked what I heard, but I was disappointed. I still do feel that way. The reason I am doing things this way is because there is one blaring problem throughout all of Volume 3. Now, one thing I am going to commend Binary Data Volume 3 on. Compared to Binary Data Volume 2, the power output is more constant and great. There is no lack of reverberation or power. The songs sound like they have weight and power to them, and I definitely appreciate Alfonso Peduto for fixing that problem. However, it amplifies the secondary main problem of Binary Data Volume 2, which was the lack of melodic variation. It felt repetitive, but there was still some variation here and there despite the lack of power in that album. Volume 3 is probably double or triple the amount of repetitiveness as Volume 2. The introduction of Binary Data Volume 3 is Binary Data 19. The beginning of this album does have some power. Binary Data 19 is pretty bold in its sound, but compared to the other two introductions to the Binary Data pieces, Binary Data 1 had a playfulness to it. Although it was repetitive, it was still playful and it had some variation. Binary Data 9, although the official release lacking in power, was probably my favorite introduction to a Binary Data volume I have ever heard. Binary Data 19 is probably my least favorite because of the amount of repetitiveness. Although I do like the melodies that are in the bass line of the song, it carries on for far too long. It feels very formulaic in a sense, and I feel like that is the main problem of this album. The formula with practically a lot of these songs seems to be make a bassline melody, keep adding stuff to it until it creates this giant crescendo, have some stops in the middle of the song to create some pauses or breathing room, and then overpower it even more, but still maintain the same bassline melody with all these other piano loops in the background, and then the song ends very abruptly. I was looking at the length of these songs before I even listened to the album, and I was appreciating the long lengths. One of the main problems of Volume 2, actually one of the small problems, was the lack of length in the songs. They were very quick, and Volume 3 seems to have fixed that. The thing is that it seems like a bandage on a gaping wound, because you fill in the time by adding egregious levels of repetition with your melody. I feel like Binary Data 20 and 31 were the only songs in this entire album to have some amount of melodic variation. When I was listening to this album, I had to restart some of the songs because I felt like I was zoning out from the amount of repetition that was going on. I know it sounds like I am trashing this album really severely, which is not what I am trying to do. I am trying to talk about some of the major faults of this album. Considering the type of music that he makes, he needs to do a lot more. Alfonso Peduto's music in this album seems to work if you have something pairing with it, probably a singing voice or other instrument to add to it, because this feels like a baseline for something else. The thing is that I am not going to judge the album based on that. I am going to judge it based on what I hear. What I get is what it is, and what it is seems to not be enough for me. The music that Alfonso Peduto makes purely uses piano. There are no other instruments. And the less you use to make your music, the less leeway you have. Alfonso Peduto only has a piano, so he barely has any leeway. He needs to make use of what he has. He needs to turn an inch into a mile somehow, and it does not seem like he did enough of that in this album. There needs to be rhythmic and melodic variation. Change the melody throughout the song. Pitch change it to make it a little bit more interesting. I would listen to Binary Data Volume 3 again, but probably as background noise rather than some type of music I would be actively engaged in. This album could have been so much more. I feel like this could have been an album where it has my full attention at all times. There is not much else I can say other than I hope Alfonso Peduto improves with time. I feel like he can definitely do that. I respect artists or just people in general that are willing to use a little bit of something and make a lot out of it. And usually that turns out to be good and it sounds amazing, and this album does sound good, but it still disappoints me in some other regards here and there. I really hate saying this because Alfonso Peduto is one of my favorite artists right now. My final rating for Binary Data Volume 3 is also going to be an 80%. I still prefer Volume 1 of Binary Data more than Volume 2 and 3. Anyway, I hope Alfonso Peduto sees this video. If he sees this, I really am sorry for a lot of what I said. I hope I do not disappoint you with my review. I just wanted to speak my mind. Anyway, I am the old one and I am logging out. Stay alive.